episode of The Twilight Zone, Rod Serling takes us on a journey that questions our reactions to aesthetics, especially how it relates to how people appear to us and how we judge them based on our conceptions of normalcy and beauty. His opening narrative is as follows. Suspended in time and space for a moment, your introduction to Miss Jane Tyler, who lives in a very private world of darkness, a universe whose dimensions are the size, thickness, and length of the swath of bandages that cover her face. In a moment, we will go back into this room, and also in a moment, we will look under those bandages, keeping in mind, of course, that we are not to be surprised by what we see, because this isn't just a hospital, and this patient 307 is not just a woman. This happens to be the Twilight Zone, and Miss Janet Tyler, with you, is about to enter it. Janet Tyler has undergone her 11th treatment, which is the maximum number that is legally allowed by the state, in her attempt to look normal. Tyler's first shown with her head completely bandaged so that her face cannot be seen. Her face is described, though, as a pitiful, twisted lump of flesh by the nurses and doctors, whose own faces are always in shadows or off camera. The outcome of the procedure cannot be known until the bandages are removed. Unable to bear the bandages any longer, Tyler pleads with the doctor and eventually convinces him to remove them early. As he prepares, the doctor develops great empathy for Tyler. The nurse expresses concern for the doctor and that she is still uneasy about Tyler's appearance. The doctor becomes displeased with the nurse and questions why Tyler or anyone must be judged on their beauty. The nurse warns him not to continue in that vein, as it is considered treason by the state. And here is what happens next.
Now, we have done all we could do. If we've been successful, well and good, there are no problems. But if, on the other hand, this final treatment has not achieved the desired result, please remember, Miss Tyler, that you can still live a long and fruitful life among people of your own kind. All right, Miss Tyler. Here comes the last of it. I wish you every good luck. No change. No change at all. Wait a minute. Turn on the light. Needle, please.
Of course, when we see the revealed woman, most of us think, oh, she's beautiful. Indeed, the actress portraying the unbandaged woman is Donna Douglas. Also, she played the role of Ellie Mae Clampett in the Beverly Hillbillies, the beautiful Ellie Mae, yes. But of course, she is hideous to the doctors and nurses who see her. And since this is her last treatment, she has no choice but to go live among her own kind. She is picked up for that journey to that ghetto by this equally hideous and frightening young man, Mr. Walter Smith. Mr. Smith encourages her to think of the saying, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and to say that over and over again, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Serling, as narrator, gives us this recommendation. That's all Miss Tyler can do, really. But here's a suggestion for those of us who want to avoid living in such a dystopian society. Never forget that the state is not God. In fact, say it over and over to yourself. If we keep that thought alive, it might help us to avoid one of the darker corners of the Twilight Zone. Now, there are a whole lot of possible lessons to explore in this episode, including that last quote about the state. But that's also relevant to my next sermon based on the episode entitled The Obsolete Man. So I decided to narrow the focus of the remaining part of my message here today on that concept of beauty and the questions of why we tend to see some things as beautiful. Is this something we've evolved? Or is it something we learn? Of course, it's both. Certs is a candy mint. Certs is a breath mint. No, it's two. Less filling, tastes great, less filling. It's both. Now, there are those of us who would... It's both. There are those of us who would like to think that beauty is just something we were taught by what books and Barbie dolls and movies and advertisements we saw growing up. But that would not be the whole truth. Not the whole truth by far. Indeed, although the folks in the Twilight Zone may have evolved to see something different, we here in this world, we have brains that have evolved to see those doctors and nurses as ugly, and the patient, Janet Tyler, and the man who will take her to the ghetto as beautiful people. What am I basing this on? The evidence that science provides, especially the science of evolution. I'm using as my primary source this book by Anjan Chatterjee, who is a professor of neurology at the Perelman School of Medicine at the University of Pennsylvania. He is director of the Penn Center for Neuroaesthetics and a member of the Center for Cognitive Neuroscience. It was published in 2014 and is called The Aesthetic Brain, How We Evolve to Desire Beauty and Enjoy Art. Although I read the whole book, it's quite interesting, and I'll be glad to loan it to you. For my message today, I'm going to be examining both the evolutionary and cultural elements of how we see beauty in people, their faces, and their bodies. And much of what I share includes summarizations, paraphrases, and quotes from various studies that were included in this book, although I do look at a couple other sources as well. So, the basic idea of evolutionary psychology, you all studied that a while back, maybe, is that our mental abilities, like our physical traits, evolved if they enhanced our survival. When it comes to beauty in people, certain physical characteristics of faces and bodies advertise a person's health and, for women, their fertility. These features, which were important in choosing a mate tens of thousands of years ago, are now what we consider as beautiful. Just as when it comes to beauty in scenery, like a nice scene in front of a beautiful lake or something, some places were more inviting to our hunter-gatherer ancestors wandering around in the distant past. These scenes looked both safe and rich in resources that would help those small bands that were trying to survive a life that was nasty and brutish. Yes, you see, specific reward systems in the brain that we have, including neurotransmitters like opiates, cannabinoids, and dopamine, all which kind of bring us pleasure, are tied to our appetites. So beautiful faces and bodies are tied to sexual desires. And landscapes are tied to our desire for safety. And we've evolved those senses of what is beautiful based on that. But as I said, I'm going to focus on faces and bodies, so let me do that. The book by Chatterjee provided lots of research evidence that humans are pretty much hardwired to regard some faces as more beautiful than others. And there is similarity, folks, across ethnicities and cultures, even those that are very isolated. very isolated. This doesn't mean that culture doesn't have an effect. It certainly does, especially regarding things like hairstyles and accessories like piercings and tattoos. Interestingly, even the research with babies as young as a few days will show that babies prefer to look at pictures of faces that we might rate as attractive. They will look longer at those faces. There are 3 parameters that contribute to facial attractiveness based on all of this research, none of which is unique to any specific ethnicity. The first parameter is averageness. The second is symmetry, and both of these parameters apply to men and women. The third parameter has to do with features that make men and women look different from each other, or the parameter of sexual dimorphism. I'm going to share a little more about these. The parameter of averageness was first found by accident. A researcher who happened to be Charles Darwin's cousin was trying to see if there were common elements in the faces of criminals convicted of murder, manslaughter, or robbery accompanied by violence. Now, you notice I was not able to come up with the criminal face average, but I did find this for Congress people, and that's a pretty good substitute. So he was trying to look at this for criminals. He decided to use a single photographic plate, hoping that the composite face would reveal the prototype of what a criminal looked like. Instead of discovering the criminal prototype face, what he found was that the composite faces were more attractive than each individual face that made up the composite. And modern research methods confirm this unexpected discovery. Now, an average face doesn't mean a plain face. These average faces have statistically averaged features, such as how thick the nose is, how far apart the eyes are set. You know, when we think of somebody that thinks somebody has big ears, that means that's bigger than average, than what we're used to seeing. All ears are kind of ugly when you think about it. They're weird. But we don't see them that way because we're so used to seeing them, you know. So, that's, you know, they're fine. If we think they're too little, they're a little smaller than average. So averaged things to us are beautiful things. Even infants look at averaged faces more than individual ones. Even children are going to look at an average face more. Now, another quantitative parameter of faces that people find attractive is symmetry. And symmetry is correlated with the judgments of attractiveness of both men's and women's faces. If they're more symmetrical, they're more attractive. This quote comes from Psychology Today article. It says, some factors that are known to affect facial symmetry are infections, inflammation, allergic reactions, injuries, mutations, chronic stress, malnourishment, DNA damage, parasites, and genetic and metabolic diseases. All of those can affect how symmetrical you are. And each of these is a potential handicap to the success of the individual and possibly his or her offspring. So it's an advertisement for your health. At least it was back in the day, you know. There was even a study using identical twins who look a whole lot alike, but environmental exposures in the womb and out caused some slight differences in twins. And the twin with the most symmetrical face was the one regarded as more beautiful or attractive. Now, I had to choose a face of somebody looking straight up and down in the camera. Most people tilt their head or something. So I found this one of, I think I'm sticking with Congress for some reason. This is Nancy Pelosi. She was looking straight. Actually, I was going to do my own face, and I had it there. I was looking straight into the camera, one of me like I am, and then symmetrical and everything. And Greg saw it, and he said, "You're not going to put that up, are you?" So I said, "Okay, I won't put that up." Because I had a little close up without my glasses and stuff and that. Okay, so I'll use Nancy Pelosi. And of course, Nancy Pelosi, most of us would consider her, especially for someone her age, to be very attractive with the help of perhaps some good plastic surgeon. But anyway, there she is looking straight. So that's Nancy Pelosi. And then this is a symmetrical, with using the earring side as the symmetry, a more symmetrical face. Now we may say, I don't like that as good as the first one because we're used to seeing her in the first one. But this is the more symmetrical face using one side of her. And to show you how different she really is, even though I would think she's a fairly symmetrical face, this is the symmetry on the other side. You can do this with your own face, by the way. You can go on the computer and Google make face symmetrical or something like that. And you can do this with your
So
own
the middle
face.
one's the right side.
I just call it the earring side and the other side. That's the same face. They have you put the thing right in the middle and then it makes it symmetrical. Very interesting. So, symmetry matters. Then the third factor that had a great deal of research and evidence behind it is sexual dimorphism. Our hormones, our sex hormones, produce certain looks and features. Estrogen feminizes and testosterone masculinizes. Now, since I'm sharing this from a UU pulpit, let me quickly add that I know that gender is a social construct and that we have individuals who may be anywhere on a continuum of masculinity to femininity in their gender expression, and that may or may not be in line with the identity they are assigned at birth. But we are not really talking about gender identity here. And your sexual orientation comes into play. But here's what the researchers did find. Researchers did find that heterosexual men, regardless of their culture, find feminized features in women attractive. The feminized effects of estrogen are similar to what we see in babies' faces. Faces that are baby-like, have large eyes, thin eyebrows, big foreheads, round cheeks, full lips, small noses, and small chins. Heterosexual men tend to find women also who look younger than their chronological age to be more attractive. And of course, if they have those baby-like features as well. You may notice that picture we had up of Nancy Pelosi, her eyes are really big. You can have that done, I think. However, there is one baby feature they don't find attractive in adult women, and that is big, puffy cheeks. So these men like high cheekbones, which is a sign of maturity. And I suppose that's why my mama taught me when I put on my makeup, I should put the rouge, to highlight my cheekbones. You know, you're supposed to show that you are now mature. And maybe that's what we hope the guys look for as well, and so they won't look for children. But that shows sexual maturity, the high cheekbones. Now, women were a little different. They find masculinized features in men attractive only to a point. If men's faces are too masculine, women experience them as domineering. And they prefer some feminine traits thrown in, which makes the man seem more warm, emotionally stable, and likely to be more committed to the relationship. Now, interestingly, they did one study where they had women choose a person for a one-night stand as opposed to a person for a relationship. And they went for the masculine guy for the one-night stand, but the one with more feminine traits for relationship. So, now you may ask, you may say, so what? What does any of this have to do with sex, reproduction, and survival? And why am I talking about this from the pulpit? Well, this is y'all. We have a first-time visitor. I always worry about that. But, well, here's an example of why it matters. It turns out that women with large and symmetrical breasts are more fertile than women with less symmetrical breasts. Women also become more symmetrical during ovulation. Similarly, testosterone, these are measurable things, y'all. Similarly, testosterone, among other things, increases human physical size. And most people like tall men. Some even say if you go back and look to see which candidate won the presidency, it's usually the taller man. And women find tall men attractive. Interestingly, that's true even if they're using a sperm donor. Women are more likely to want the sperm of taller men, who I suppose at one time were better at fighting off the bears or other men. So they've evolved this. Well, that's enough about the evolutionary part of beauty. So at least we should be aware that it's there. You should be aware that that's there, but not let it determine who we choose to live our lives with anymore. We evolved in ways that were pretty important to our hunter-gatherer ancestors, but are not that important to us today, and perhaps can even be harmful. Just as we evolved to like sweet things and lots of calories from our hunter-gatherer ancestors, we now have to fight that evolutionary need to go for that sweet thing all the time, or we end up with diabetes. So they can't just go with something because it seems natural to us or because it's how we evolved. Similarly, we should be able to look past someone's height or breast size and determine who we want to be our partners or friends. But the evolutionary aspects are there, and we all then tend to have that implicit bias. So once you discover, yes, I have that bias, then sometimes you can look beyond that, knowing that that's just a bias that you evolved. Just like now I'm trying to cut out sugar. I know I don't need it. I evolved to want it, you know? So I have to work on that. Now, since this book was written by a neurologist, there's a whole lot in it about how the brain works and sees attractiveness, and how our brains tend to generalize attractiveness to other features. And we do this, y'all. For example, attractive children are considered more intelligent, honest, and pleasant, and are thought to be natural leaders by their teachers. Teachers often give, here comes a teacher. Teachers often give attractive children better grades, unless the tests were standardized when they've studied that. Greg, you're laughing because you don't think you do that, do you?
Absolutely.
I think most of the tests are standardized. Similarly, I found that when I started teaching online courses and not seeing people, that I could perhaps be less biased in my evaluation. And as we get to know folks, though, here's the important thing. As we get to know folks, we see them as more attractive or less so. And we also look at things like movement in determining attractiveness. When I used to go to Women's Spirit, there was a woman there who most would say was unattractive. Her facial features did not fit the prototype of an attractive woman, and she kind of had a hump on her back. But then at one of our talent shows that we had, she danced. Yeah, she danced. And as I watched her move so elegantly to that music, I thought, wow, what a beautiful woman. What a beautiful woman. And I continued then to see the beauty in this woman. Similarly, if I'm talking to someone who's very interesting conversation, I see them as more attractive, and vice versa. Of course, there are other things that can affect the eye of the beholder. I shared this on Facebook about an incident that happened to me a couple of weekends ago when I was not with you all. I was with Greg at a conference in New Orleans. I was walking down Canal Street in the afternoon. I call this looking through drunk goggles. So I'm walking down Canal Street in New Orleans, and this obviously drunk man, about 50, walks by and tells me I'm beautiful. I motion for him to move on. And the young man with him apologizes to me, and he tells me that this older man is his stepfather. The older man turns back and says, "But I really mean it. You are beautiful. You are a beautiful woman." This time, I nod at him and say, "Thank you," knowing that his stepson, who now has his arm around him, will guide him away. I smile thinking, when you are 69, you should be thankful for any compliment you can get. Thank you, sir, you know. What's that song they used to sing about girls all get prettier at closing time? You've had enough to drink, you know. Perhaps Rod Serling's message is right. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. But we have to learn, and it's a learned thing, just like me with the sugar, we have to learn to behold more deeply. Behold more deeply. Greg and I have been looking at old movies lately rather than watching so much of the news. Mm-hmm. And recently we've seen 2 movies with Audrey Hepburn. Now, Audrey Hepburn, oh boy, you talk about beauty. She's so beautiful. Of course, her outer beauty is obvious. I was not aware that as a child in the Netherlands, Hepburn nearly died of hunger in a country that devastated by World War II, and was rescued by the UN refugee program, which in her later life she worked for. Towards the end of her life, she was asked about her beauty secrets. She replied with remarkable grace. Here's what she said. For lovely eyes, seek out the good in people. For a slim figure, share your food with the hungry. For beautiful hair, let a child run his or her fingers through it once a day. People, even more than things, have to be restored, renewed, revived, reclaimed, and redeemed. Never throw out anybody. The beauty of a woman is not in a facial mold. True beauty in a woman is reflected in her soul. It is the caring that she lovingly gives, the passion that she shows, and the beauty of a woman with passing years only grows. I think those words are true for all people. That's the beauty that I am trying to behold in folks, even though that knowing I have this implicit bias, being aware of that, but looking for that deeper beauty. And as I look out at this congregation, that is what I see. I can see that beauty. You are so beautiful to me. Can't you see? You're everything I hope for. You're all I'll ever need. You are so beautiful to me. You are so beautiful to me. Blessed be you beautiful people.